And now to start editing our video, we can go over to the Cut tab or the Edit tab. So we'll start with the Cut tab because that's specifically new to DaVinci Resolve 16. So the Cut tab is basically a simplified version of the Edit tab where it presents less windows to you on screen, has a little bit less features than what you're able to do in the Cut tab, but it's more optimized for if you're working on one screen or if all you're trying to do is make a bunch of cuts to get your video out the door and you don't really need to worry too much about advanced settings such as doing keyframe animation. So just to take a quick look at the Edit tab, one of the main things that is missing from the Cut tab is the inspector here. So in order to see some of the settings that pop open in the inspector, if I drop a clip onto the timeline like this and I left click on it, you can see that there's a lot of settings you can edit about a video clip inside of DaVinci Resolve 16. Now, some of these still exist on the Edit tab, but as I mentioned before, you can't click on these little diamonds in order to animate a property such as zoom over time. And so once again, the main difference is that on the Edit tab, you have more full control over everything in your video clips, the changes and adjustments that you want to make to those. The interface can get a little bit cluttered, so you may actually prefer to do some basic editing in the Cut tab instead. Another one of the key differences between the Inspector tab and now jumping back over to the Cut tab is that on the Edit tab, you actually only have one timeline that you're working with here. So if you want to make any changes, you're going to need to scrub throughout the timeline and navigate with your timeline cursor to get where you want to make your edits. But on the Cut tab, you have not one but three timelines that actually exist to you, two that you can see on screen. So the bottom timeline works differently than in the Edit tab as well, because this timeline is always going to be centered no matter what on whatever your position is in the video. And then the second timeline right above it will always show the entire video project. So whether your timeline is 18 seconds long or an hour long, you'll always be able to see all of the clips on this timeline. The third timeline, which is for making frame-by-frame edits, shows up when you're trying to make adjustments to the edges of one of your clips. So let's start by dragging a second clip into the timeline, and I'll put it on this main project timeline that shows everything. So I'm going to drag this right above the video track 1, which will create the video track 2 immediately. You can see it numbered over here, video track 2, video track 1. Main thing to note, if you don't already know, is that whatever is on the top video track is always going to show over whatever is on lower tracks. If I go to this part where the second video clip comes in, you can see that as soon as the second clip is there, we can no longer see the bottom video. Now, in most cases for the base video, we'd want that to not be layered on top of each other, but to be side by side. So with this clip on the top video track, I can left click and drag that down here to the video track 1. And you can see that in the Cut tab, you don't have to be exactly precise about things. There's a little bit of smart sensing about what you're trying to do inside of the Cut tab of DaVinci Resolve 16. So it'll kind of auto snap there to the right side of the first clip. Now both clips are on video track 1. And in order to see the third timeline, I could do something like left click on the border between these two clips. So now you can see two preview windows over here in clip edit mode. This is another one of the differences. It'll show the ending frame of the left-hand clip and the starting frame of the right-hand clip. So what dragging on the border between two clips normally does is pulls in more or less of the source material, but because the source material is already fully in the timeline, we'd actually have to decrease part of it. So one way I could remove some of the source material from the timeline would be to hit Control B to make a blade slice, and then that'll separate one clip into two, and I can hit delete in order to remove that part. Another would be that rather than clicking on the border between two video clips, you can click on the right side and drag it in. So this is basically removing part of the start of the clip by a few seconds there. And now you'll see that when we left click on the border between those clips, we actually get green instead of red. So the green represents that there's extra source material to pull from in making our adjustments. So now if we left click, we can actually drag to the left and right, and you'll notice that those two previews at the top there are immediately updated in real time. So we can see what the new starting frame and ending frame is going to be between these two video clips. And if we want even more control, that's where the third timeline comes into play, because you can see that this timeline works on a frame-by-frame change. So you can see how it will start saying +1 or -1 or -2 frames. So we're doing frame-by-frame adjustments, which will allow you to get exactly the right starting point and ending point that you're looking for. And once you find that spot, you can just kind of let go, and then you'll have made your change to both clips simultaneously by controlling the starting and ending point. So at this point, I might want to go to the start of this video clip and adjust or trim the start of this video. So I can drag this in to basically pick the frame where we want the video to start at. So we could do it here, where in the background that guy kind of is holding his chin a little bit, and let go, and our change has been made. So let's show a couple more quick adjustments you can make inside of the Cut tab. If you want to add in a video transition, go to the part of the timeline where you have an edge of a clip, such as the start of your video. And then over here in the media pool, you'll notice that there's an option here for dissolve. So that's referring to a dissolve transition, which is probably about as simple as you can get. And if we click on that with a simple left click, you'll see that the dissolve transition is immediately added on here to our video clip. You can see over here in the preview window, it's a cross dissolve. If we hit the spacebar or the play button, we can actually see how that looks. So let's play that back one more time. And you can see that in this case, because it's dissolving from black, it simply fades the video in. But if we go in between two video clips, such as that cut we had earlier, we can click dissolve again, and that'll create a quick transition between these two video clips. So this will have it fade from one clip into the other clip in a very smooth transition. And of course, we can go to the end of the video and have a fade out by clicking dissolve one more time and having the video fade out at the end of the video. So that's just a really easy way you can add in transitions to your video clips. So one more thing about the Cut tab, if we open up this tools window, you can see that under the preview, then you'll get a bunch of options that you can actually control about your video clip. So you'll be able to see the video clip that you're working on in your main project timeline here. So left click on it to be sure about which one you're editing. And then we can change something like the zoom here by changing the value here from 1 to 2, which is going to massively zoom in our video shot. And we can hit play to see how that looks with that change made. Note that it only affects the video clip we're working on and not the entire project. So I'm going to undo that for now, but note that there's other settings you can change very similarly to the inspector in the edit tab, which we'll get to in a second here, such as position X, position Y. If we go over to the other tabs, you have cropping the edges of a window. So if you want to remove part of the left side or the top or the bottom or the right, you can do that. On the fourth one, you can increase the speed. So if we wanted to make it 1.5 times speed, we can increase that. Note that that may modify your timeline simply because it runs out of source material when it's playing back in a faster speed. But if we go here and hit space here, you can see that the characters are kind of moving a little bit faster than they would in real time. So hit Control Z in order to undo that. Okay, so lastly, before jumping to the Edit tab, note that you can add in other types of transitions up here in the top left-hand corner. You would drag these onto the border between two clips in order to change the type of transition. You can also add in titles to your video timeline, and you can add in special effects. So this works mostly the same way as the Edit tab, and as such, I'll talk about that more in a minute here.